Good morning and welcome to Mosaic. I'm Rabbi Weiss, and honored to be your host this morning. This morning we're going to start a fascinating conversation about the Jewish Community Federation of San Francisco, Marin and Sonoma counties and the peninsula. And here to join us in this wonderful conversation are Susan Mall and Lynn Bunim. Lynn Bunim, for over 40 years, has been a corporate executive and now currently is on the executive committee of the board of directors of the Federation of San Francisco, Marin and Sonoma counties and the peninsula. Welcome, Lynn.
Glad to be here.
And Susan Mall, for over 25 years, has been an active volunteer in the Jewish community working on very special projects, and currently is the director of the Federation's Centennial project, celebrating the Federation's 150 years in the community.
100.
100.
100.
100.
Right.
So we're ahead of ourselves.
Right. There were Jews 150 years ago in San Francisco, but the Federation really formed 100 years ago. Actually, it was really 1910. We're in our one more year, but we're very proud that the Jewish Community Federation is as vibrant today and is as important today, really, as it was when it was founded. It was founded when there were 12 different agencies that existed after the earthquake to really help people get back on their feet. One of them was Sinai Memorial Chapel, and one was Mount Zion Hospital, and the Eureka Benevolent Society was one of them. And the group of leaders of these different agencies realized they were all raising money for their agencies, and it was not efficient, and they were at cross purposes. So a group of men got together, and there's pictures of the old men. They sat at a table and they decided they would come together as a federation and much more efficiently raise money for the community. So there was one central agency that went out in the community to help those in need. Today we are celebrating this event, this 100 years. We're celebrating it through the year. Most specifically, we're having a day on April 10th. I don't know if your viewers can see this.
We'll put it on the screen there.
Great. One large community celebration with the best and the brightest in the Jewish community. Internationally, nationally, people are flying in from Israel. We have David Brooks, Pulitzer Prize winning author from New York. Actually, Washington, excuse me. Coming, we have people in our community celebrating the accomplishments, the innovative thinking, the creativity, the San Francisco Symphony. This is available to all our donors, and for people who aren't donors yet, there is still an opportunity to be part of this day and come for $36. You can be a donor and be part of the all-day celebration.
And it's called FedFest. It's on Sunday, FedFest, April 10th.
Yes. And it's at a new location for many people. It's at UCSF Mission Bay, which is a very forward-thinking facility. Everything is very green, and that is the direction that, you know, all the agencies are.
And it begins at 10 o'clock in the morning and goes until 5 o'clock in the evening.
Yes, and the Federation is honoring George Shultz for his work in helping to free the Soviet Jews when he was the Secretary of State.
And Lynn, as a volunteer bringing your expertise to the Federation, what was it that attracted you to become involved?
So interesting listening to the history of Jews in San Francisco. I believe that every generation needs to leave its mark in its own way on the community. And I grew up in San Francisco. I grew up as a very assimilated Jew. I had a Christmas tree in my house, blessed by the rabbi of the temple, and spent most of my life really in the non-Jewish world until one day I got a phone call. Actually, the phone call was from none other than Susan Mall, sort of asking, would you be willing to volunteer just a couple of hours of your time for an organization I hadn't heard anything about called JVS, better known as Jewish Vocational Services. And it was really a question, would you just say yes this one time, just for a couple of hours? And one of the things that I have found through a life now that's turned out to be 20 years of volunteering in the Jewish community is it's incredibly enriching, and it leaves a legacy. And in the same way, my mother was a volunteer. I know my grandmother was actually involved in the Benevolent Society. I went back and found out. and I can set the stage for my children and their children, my grandchildren. And I think that for any of your listeners out there to understand that just by saying yes once isn't really enough. You sort of have to keep saying yes. And so my history over the last 20 years was the accumulation of yeses led to climbing some ladders that I never expected, both at JVS, Jewish Vocational Services, and then ultimately, as you said, I'm on the board of the Federation, Jewish Community Federation today, and a leader there.
Fantastic. We're off to a wonderful start. Please join us in just a moment when we return to Mosaic. If you're interested in coming to FedFest, it is being held on Sunday, April 10th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Mission Bay Conference Center at UCSF. If you'd like to have more information, then please contact the Federation at 415-777-0411. Welcome back to Mosaic. I'm Rabbi Eric Weiss, and honored to be your host. We're joined in a wonderful, robust conversation about the Jewish Community Federation of San Francisco, Marin, and Sonoma counties and the peninsula, and in particular its 100-year celebration since its establishment. We're joined by Susan Mall, a longtime volunteer for special projects of over 25 years with the Federation and currently the director of the Federation Centennial, and Lynn, Bunim, over 40 years a corporate executive and now on the executive committee of the Federation's board of directors. Welcome back, Lynn and Susan.
Together, we almost have 100 years.
There you go. Perfect. Okay. So April 10th is your birthday.
Right. You know,
and our legacy.
Eric, what makes the San Francisco Federation interesting among all the federations in the country is that in other cities in America, it wasn't the Jews that were really on the ground floor of the communities. The Jews in Chicago, New York, they came later, and other pioneers were there first, on the East Coast especially. In San Francisco, the pioneers, many, you know, Levi Strauss being one of the most famous, they came looking for fame and fortune. They were the entrepreneurs. They were the courageous ones. And so that spirit, that entrepreneurial spirit, has really sustained us for 100 years. And even 100 years ago, it was the leaders in business who decided how to best handle and shape the Jewish community. And the same is true today. You know, people like Lynn Bunim, who have been leaders in their corporate world, have so graciously and devotedly committed so much of their time to shaping the Jewish community that we've been so fortunate. But we've been able, I think the San Francisco Federation has been able to be more nimble and more innovative, perhaps, than other communities in the country. Like, no other community has an LGBT alliance and has tried to be as inclusive, I think, in the whole diverse Jewish community as the San Francisco Jewish Community Federation.
Well, I would say the counterpart to that is that the community, the people, and I don't care whether they are business like I happen to come from, or maybe they are working as a teacher. I think about your host of listeners out there this morning. I bet if any one of them pauses for a minute and says, what skill set do I have? This spirit of saying yes that Susan talks about that goes back to 100 years, it's still out there in the community. And having been involved and thinking just a little bit about the portals that people have, if you just sort of stop and think about our community, whether it is the Jewish Community Federation, or it is a Jewish agency, or it is a synagogue, or a day school. And then you stop to think about the number of opportunities. They could be small, they could be large, they could be strategic thinking, they could be fundraising, they could be licking envelopes, they could do anything. And then you think about time. Everybody says, oh, I don't have time. Again, I bet I would encourage every listener to sort of think for just a minute about, do I have an hour? And more importantly, do I have a yes in my vocabulary if somebody were to call and ask me to make a difference and begin to continue that legacy?
I think that one of the most wonderful things about our Federation region that I think also makes it unique in the country is the way that it works on the ground. I know that from the Bay Area Jewish Healing Center perspective that the way in which we've gotten some of our leaders are actually through the Federation itself. And there's a marvelous sense of porousness between leadership exchange, the way there's so many different places to say yes in the landscape, and everybody is sharing a yes with one another, and then people actually can move from place to place and accumulate, I think, a tremendous amount of knowledge and skill set and understanding for just building leadership. And to me, that really is what a community does to build resiliency for the next generation.
And I think there's a very personal piece to this as well, which is I challenge any volunteer to question the statement. And I'm going to say, I guarantee, a little bit like the warehouse, I guarantee that if you become a volunteer, you will get more than you receive. It's happened every single time.
Absolutely.
And for those who maybe are loosely affiliated with the Jewish community, as I was, it's a way to go back and reconnect with your Jewish values, your Jewish life, and show your own family what you are doing. I've actually affected my parents, my father of blessed memory, and my mom who's living, as well as my children and grandkids, you know, starting with the tzedakah box. So I think that, again, that people get back so much by giving.
When we have just a minute, believe it or not, if you can think of just one thing, and I know one thing is almost unfair to say, that you hope somebody gains by saying yes to the community, what would you think it would be?
I think that people can, I think it's an opportunity that by saying yes, though you're being asked to help others, I think what Lynn said is very true, that really what it does is provide meaning in your own life. And I think in today's world, it's important to have meaning in your life.
Absolutely.
And I think through Jewish values and feeling like you're helping to repair the world, it does really much more for you than even it does for others who you don't know.
Susan and Lynn, thank you so much for being with us. We're going to be joined in just a moment with two other guests to continue this conversation. But in the meantime, remember a day to celebrate saying yes, FedFest, on Sunday, April 10th from 10 to 5 at the Mission Bay Conference Center. Again, if you want more information, call 415-777-0411.
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.